Well, greetings to you. I bought, for the first time in many, many years, a Daily Telegraph because the headline captured my attention. I then read an op-ed by General Dannett, and of course I read the editorial. I have never read so much silly, ill-informed nonsense in all my born days. I never thought I'd live to see it in the Daily Telegraph, when they used to have all the Times and these main supposedly good newspapers, which used to have people like John Keegan and Claire Hollingworth writing about matters defence and matters military. Fascinating how poor these people are. Now I'm going to just run through a few facts yet again, if you'll bear with me. The CIA-inspired coup in the Ukraine in 2014 installed a government suitable to the Americans. The Americans want regime change, or then wanted regime change, in the Russian Federation. And they thought they could do this by stoking up a war with the Russian Federation and bleeding the Russian Federation dry. And that's what it was all about. And in order to provoke Russia, the hostility to from the Ukraine to the Russian Federation manifested itself in the murder of somewhere in the region of 14,000 ethnic Russians in the eastern Ukraine, and constant nagging problems on this matter, and the try and closing down Russian culture within the Ukraine. All of this has been said before, and I'm not going to go there again. And if you think I'm being bright after the event, have a look at my website where I said how this would unfold. I got my timing wrong. I thought it was unfolded like this at least 18 months ago, and it didn't, but it's unfolding now, and it's in its very, very final stages. So everything I said has now come true, apart from the timing aspect. And timing, of course, as we all know, is a critical thing, but leaving that aside. So what are the Daily Telegraph? What's in it? Well, first of all, we have Keir Starmer, with no military experience whatsoever, promising troops on the ground in the Ukraine as a peacekeeping force. In case, he says, and you can read it for yourself, in case the Russians decide to invade again. Now, I'm not quite sure whether Keir Starmer is just thick and doesn't get it, or he's playing some other sort of game which I don't understand. The only reason that the Russian Federation and the Ukraine war started is because the Russian Federation will not accept, under any circumstances, Ukraine membership of NATO. They've made that very clear. Any more than the Americans would tolerate, all those years ago, missiles in Cuba from the Soviet Union. It's on their doorstep. And there's a double reason for that now, and that is hypersonic missiles. Only the Russian Federation have the technology for hypersonic missiles. Of course, the Americans will catch up. They will catch up. They're bound to catch up. And that means NATO means American bases. And that also means that hypersonic missiles could be within just a few minutes' strike of Moscow. That's something that the Russian Federation simply cannot tolerate. They can't tolerate that any more than the Americans would tolerate those missiles in Cuba. And is this a fight for democracy? Well, Zelensky is busy locking up all the opposition. He's cancelled his elections. I wonder where Keir Starmer got that one from. So he's cancelled elections, so the Ukraine is not a democracy. And they're still carping about Putin being an oligarch. Well, he was elected, which is more than can be said for Zelensky. So Ukraine is not a democracy without an election, and they need to find a new leadership under a fair, supervised plebiscite. And that's something else. So let's get away from this situation of being, the big ugly Russian bear is intimidating Ukraine, and they're a nice, peace-loving democracy. They're not, never were. It's a corrupt basket case of a country. And you can see that, and I've showed on my website, by the number of Maseratis, Lamborghinis and Ferraris driving around Monaco with Ukrainian number plates. Your money. Taxpayers' money. American taxpayers' money. So that's the problem that we have with Keir Starmer, who thinks by putting a few... we don't have an army. We don't have an army. It's 50,000 all told. So it means you could probably only deploy 10,000. Let's get real. The Russian Federation have 1.5 million men with a centralised command structure now under arms. Over half their army is combat experienced. And those old soldiers watching me today, and I know I have plenty watching me, know that combat experience is immeasurably a powerful thing. So we are not in a position, even with American help, to do anything from a military perspective, other than going to a full-out nuclear war. Do you want that? Does your family want that? Do you give a shit about what's going on over there when you're worried about your family? Do you want a nuclear war? Of course you don't. Nobody does. So we are where we are. We have to have some peace negotiations, and they will not include NATO being part of that. The Russian Federation have made that very clear. The editorial, and remember the Daily Telegraph, is now run by Boris Johnson, who has been diametrically opposed to peace in the Ukraine since 2022, April, when there was a deal on the table, which he scuppered. So in the editorials, we're getting Boris Johnson's point of view, which of course is worthless. It's worthless. And then the op-ed was by Lord Dannatt. Well, okay, Dannatt's a soldier, but he doesn't seem to have any understanding of geopolitical, the modern geopolitical world. And he's talking about NATO, Ukraine, at some stage becoming a member of NATO and protected by Article 5. Dannatt simply doesn't get it. This is what it's all about. The Russian Federation cannot and will not ever join NATO. And Trump, God bless him, Trump has actually realised this and said so. It's not going to happen. And as soon as we get some real politic in this, the better off we'll all be. We are where we are, and we have to deal with where we are. And it was a war of the West's making. Not of Putin's making. He doesn't want to run a shithole in the Western Ukraine. He just wants to make sure that the Russian Federation is strategically and politically and militarily safe. Don't write to me and tell me that I'm some kind of Putin apologist. I'm an associate member of the Royal College of Defence Studies. I've been a published military historian. I know what I'm talking about, all right? I'm not a political stooge. So don't write to me with that bloody nonsense, because it's very annoying, and I've said it before. So let's sit down, let's have peace. And if we'd done this in April 2022, we'd have saved the lives of probably over 600,000 young men. Think about it. This unnecessary war, aren't most wars unnecessary, could have stopped then. It can't stop now under some sort of negotiated settlement. The Russians will call the shots because the Russians have won on the battlefield. You do not need the brains of bloody Field Marshal to understand what's happened. Lord Dannatt, wakey. So let's hope for peace, and let's hope for global peace. Let's don't have another fight in the Middle East, another worthless war in the Middle East against a country of the CIA's choosing. Peace is a good thing. So Starmer, understand this matter, understand it if you will, for goodness sake, and let's step back from a potential brink of a world war. We don't want a third one, do we? Please, politicians and old soldiers, have a look at the First World War and the Second World War, which is the same war in two parts. Have a look and see the deaths, see the maimings, see the terrible tragedies that major wars cause. And step back. Step back now. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based. And I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I'll automatically share it with you. So, surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.